Okay, welcome. So today's study is Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha. It means to go out. It's when Abraham gets called out into the wilderness by faith. He was saved by faith. Um, Abraham was living in the land of Ur, gets called out into the wilderness to go on a journey and trust and follow the voice of Jehovah. And this is the beginning of Abraham's journey. There is so much in here. There's so much in here um, to go through. I'm so excited. I love this portion. It's one of my favorites. I think they're all these first ones. These first ones are just all my favorites. Um, because it shows you the original pattern. It shows you what I want you to watch for in this portion is the pattern. So the pattern is saved by grace through faith, getting called out of the land of idols and sin and all of that, and getting called out into the wilderness. Okay. You see that pattern here with Abraham, and then you're going to see it again with the Israelites. You'll see it over and over and over again. It's the same cycle. And that's why in the New Testament, you see them talking about the same cycle. They're telling the people, like, especially when you get into Galatians, and we're going to touch on Galatians a bit here today, but I just want to kind of set the groundwork for you. So Abraham was not circumcised of the flesh when he left Ur. He left Ur by faith because Jehovah called to him and he's like, okay, come out into the wilderness, walk with me, right? Halakha with me. And so Abraham came out. Abraham didn't get circumcised. I think he was like 75. So he was walking in the wilderness quite a while before he got circumcised of the flesh. Okay. And so you'll notice in the beginning of Abraham's journey that he's still stumbling. He's still figuring things out. He's lying about who Sarai is. He's having these run-ins. They create an Ishmael because they weren't walking by pure faith. So all of these things are still happening. And then later on in the journey, you see that Abraham figures it out. He goes through these tests. He goes through a series of tests, and Abraham is tested again and again and again. And as he's tested, he grows and he goes to the next level and he goes to the next level. Abraham is definitely, I would say, so many people look up to different characters in the Bible. And I would say, obviously Yeshua is number one, but looking up to Abraham is a wonderful thing because Abraham really figured it out. He really, really did. Yeah. So let us journey together into Lech Lecha. I have something fun for you today too. That's why I was so excited about the study, and I'm so sad that I can't show you everything that I wanted to show you. But the recording will be up on the discipleship training, and on the discipleship training, you will be able to see all the visuals that I had for you. I'll try to turn the camera around where it makes sense, but yeah, it's a little more tricky to do it this way. So the visuals will be up on the discipleship training. So let's pray first. Okay. Yehovah, I just thank you for bringing us all together. I thank you for blessing this study. Father, even when things go wrong and they're not quite how we wanted them to be, you're always here providing your peace, your grace, and your mercy for us to just continue on the path that you've called us to continue on. I just thank you for every single one that joins me on these studies. I enjoy doing them and I enjoy spending this time with your people so much. I just pray, Father, that you bless all of us with wisdom and peace and just an abundance of the understanding of what you're trying to speak to us in your Torah. Open our eyes and ears to see the wonderful nuggets of truth and the wonderful things that you have to show us in your word. I just want to pray for all the people that are in war-torn countries right now, all the people that are being held captive. I just want to pray for the captives to be set free, Father. And I pray, Father, just for your hand to be moving upon this earth. Give us wisdom in these times. Help us to not fear. Help us to not be alarmed. Yeshua's instruction was when we saw rumors of wars and wars that we would not be alarmed. We would understand that these things had to come to pass, Father. And we just thank you for your grace and your abundance of peace, even in times that are not so peaceful. We just thank you that you walk with us in peace and we can trust hearing you as we go through our own wilderness. I just want to pray, Father, over all of these people that there's a healing that happens in their lives, whether it be emotional, mental, physical, whatever they need, that will be healed. I pray, Father, that chains will break. I pray, Father, that through studying your word, they will gain new insights and new revelation on how to apply the word to your life and walk with you in a closer way. In Yeshua's mighty name, amen. Okay, so I have something special for you today. And I wish we would have started this last week. So I had an old friend, a very old friend, and he passed away just after Sukkot this year. And years ago, I'm thinking like 3 years ago, um, him and his son had started. I actually suggested this to them because his voice, this man's voice, is so amazing to hear. And he would always read the Torah portions for us when we studied. And so I suggested that they record the Torah portions or they record the Tanakh because there's so many recordings out there, and they take out the name and they take out they take out the name, and they don't use the words that we like to use. And so they eventually started to record these studies, and they had finished it. So he had sat there and read the entire Tanakh on audio, and he passed away last week. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He passed away of old age. It's not it's sad, but it's one of those things where when somebody passes away and they've lived a really full, beautiful life, it's a different kind of sadness, right? So he has these beautiful recordings recorded, and I wanted to use them to listen to the Old Testament portion today, because you'll see why. His voice is just amazing. He was an actor in the 50s. He was an actor in the 50s. I can't remember what he was in, but it was quite a few small roles. He was just one of the sweetest men that I've ever known. So here we go. Let's listen. First, I want to listen to his introduction to the entire Torah portions. This is the introduction that he gave. And it's just a bit of information about, how he feels about it. Okay, I had them all queued up. I'm having one of these computer days today. Yeah, I had them all queued up, and then they took my queue away. That's okay. I'm gonna have to re-queue them up. This is a day of this has been a day of technical difficulties. Okay, so this is his preface. This is his preface that he wanted to share, first of all.
Genesis 0, Preface. At the request of my family and friends, I am about to undertake the reading of the word of our Heavenly Father and Creator, Yahweh, as written in the Hallelujah Scriptures. And I think it only prudent that I explain before I start that my pronunciation and or rendering of persons, places, and things may not be completely correct due to their origin. But I put my faith in Yahweh that when he tells me that not one dot or tittle will ever be changed or removed from his message, I am sure his message will be understood. So I begin in the knowledge that Yahweh will bless his word and all who listen and hear.
Isn't his voice amazing? Okay. So I have these recordings now, so we're going to try to go from them. So we're going to start today in Genesis 12:1. Just takes a minute for them to load.
Genesis chapter number 12. And Yahweh said to Abram, Go yourself out of your land, from your relatives and from your father's house, to a land which I show you. And I shall make you a great nation, and bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram left as Yahweh had commanded him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot took his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the beings whom they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. And Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, To your seed I give this land. And he built there an altar to Yahweh, who had appeared to him. And from there he moved to the mountain east of Bethel. And he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west, and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to Yahweh, and called on the name of Yahweh. And Abram set out, continuing toward the south. And a scarcity of food came to be in the land, and Abram went down.
Okay, I'm just going to pause there for 1 second. These are some of the things I wanted to show you today. First of all, I want to show you the map of Abraham's journey. See if I can do this. Okay, so we have the map. So Abraham started out here in Ur, right? And he journeys. There's Haran, which is where he ends up. It doesn't show on this map where this is his later journeys. This is when he's with Lot and that. So we'll hear about this later. But this is where he started out near Babylon, going up through the Mesopotamia. So this is the Fertile Crescent. You'll see that Nineveh's there. Just to give you an idea of his journey. Can you imagine making that journey by foot? And so he left with a whole bunch of people. And so he left with I think it says it's at one point 318 souls. And what's interesting about that, when it says he leaves with 318, right? Well, he doesn't say that yet, but it's going to say in the future. But then, so he leaves with all these people that they took with him. So it was a giant caravan that they took with them, and these are the people that he acquired unto his family. So it's a big group, a large group of them leaving. It's not just Abram on his own. And so he gets to, okay, so he does get to east of Bethel and pitched his tent. So by the end of that journey, he's over in Bethel, which is near, it's in Edom, and it's up near Hebron. And then there's Mount Moriah there. Yeah. So he has gone all that way to get to there. It's quite a journey. I don't know the exact number of miles, but pretty interesting. I think Bethel is in Palestine now. So I think the Gaza Strip, I think Bethel's in there now. So Bethel is where I believe that that was it Joseph? Yeah, where no, it's not Joseph. Jacob had the dream about the ladder going to heaven. And so a lot of people think that there's a opening in the firmament there where angels come up and go down near Bethel. And that's within the Gaza Strip. So that makes you think, why do people fight over that section so much, right? It's really fascinating, really fascinating. Also very sad what's going on there, of course. Okay, so let's move on to Abraham and Sarai in Egypt. So they head into Egypt. I have to download these to get them to work. Dang. I can't pause them because then they don't keep playing. I'll have to download them and try again next time. A day of technical difficulties. My apologies.
Genesis chapter number 12.
So I'll just
And
go forward.
Yahweh said to Abram, came to be in the land, and Abram went down to Mitzrayim to dwell there, for the scarcity of food was severe in the land. And it came to be when he was close to entering Mitzrayim that he said to Sarai his wife, See, I know that you are a fair woman to look at, and it shall be when the Mizrites see you that they shall say, This is his wife, and they shall kill me, but let you live. Please, say you are my sister, so that it shall be well with me for your sake, and my life be spared because of you. And it came to be when Abram came into Mitzrayim, that the Mizrites saw the woman that she was very fair. And Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her before Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. And he treated Abram well for her sake. And he had sheep and cattle, and male donkeys, and male and female servants, and female donkeys and camels. But Yahweh plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this you have done to me? Why did you not inform me that she was your wife? Why did you say, She is my sister? And so I was going to take her to my wife. Look, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
Okay, so we could stop there for a minute. So you'll notice in the beginning of Abraham's journey, he's going into the wilderness, he's making offerings, but he's also still not fully trusting Yahuwah, in that he isn't trusting Yahuwah to keep him safe in the land of Egypt, even so he's being dishonest. And you'll see this kind of play out several times. Which is really, really interesting because further on, you'll see in Abraham's journey, further on, he seems to trust Yah more and more and more as he goes on. And just like us, so we start walking with Yahuwah and we kind of don't have that full trust. But as we walk with him and as we continue our journey, that trust builds, because a covenant is both sides of the relationship, right? You're moving towards Yahuwah in covenant, and he's moving towards you and fulfilling his word with you, right? And so that relationship grows, just like any relationship you would have. So if you have a relationship with a friend or a partner, as you are loyal to that friendship, to that relationship, and they are loyal back to you, that relationship grows, and you begin to trust each other more and more and more. And Yah tests us. He tests us in ways like, do you trust me? Do you trust me? And he'll bring you to circumstances in your life and ask you to trust him. And it won't make any sense in your carnal mind what he's asking you to do. But as you trust him, he will show you the outcome. All right, I got to download the next one. So we're going to go on to Genesis 13. We're at Genesis 13.
Genesis chapter number 13. And Abram went up from Mitzrayim into the south, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him. And Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of Yahweh. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together. For their possessions were great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And at that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, Please, let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not all the land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Mitzrayim as you go toward Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot moved east. Thus they separated from each other, Abram dwelling in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelling in the cities of the plains, and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were evil and sinned before Yahweh exceedingly so. And after Lot had separated from him, Yahweh said to Abram, Now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see I shall give to you and your seed forever. And I shall make your seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could count the dust of the earth, then your seed also could be counted. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth tree of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to Yahweh.
Okay, this one is so interesting. So if you go back to where Abraham and Lot are having this conversation, their groups, their respective families have grown so big that they can't live together in the same area. And so this really speaks to the difference, the slight difference in characters between the two men. Now, remember that Lot means veiled. So Lot means veiled. And then Abraham means, Abraham means father of the nations, right? Once he gets that Ham. Abram means father, I think. Abram, name meaning. Exalted father, father of many. Abram meaning exalted father, which later became Abraham. The name contraction of the more common name Abram, meaning my father is exalted. So basically it means father. And so you have Lot, which means veil, and Abram, which means father. And you see that in their characters. You see these different things kind of play out in their characters. Lot doesn't always see things quite clearly, and he hasn't quite arrived as a patriarch. And he never really does. He ends up fathering the kingdom of Moab, and we all know that Moab was not a great kingdom. And it's not because he wasn't trying to walk after Jehovah, he was veiled. He didn't see things quite clearly a lot of the times. Now, in this interaction between Abram and Lot, Abram's saying, look, all this land is before us. Go ahead and choose. So Abraham's heart is to give Lot the first choice. Okay. And we see a little bit of Lot's character in this. And Lot says, he looks to the fertile valley, and he sees with his eyes that it's good, right? What did Eve do? She looked at the tree and she's like, well, it looks good. Looks good to the eyes, even though I'm being told not to eat of it, right? I'm still going to eat of it, right? There's a parallel here with Lot. He's looking at the fertile valley of the Jordan, which will later become Sodom and Gomorrah. And he's looking at it and he's thinking, well, it looks really good. It's really fertile, but he's not looking with his spiritual eyes. He's just looking with his carnal eyes, right? And so he goes and chooses, and he says, it looks just like the garden of the Lord. So it looks like the Garden of Eden there. So I want to go in that direction. Whereas Abram's trusting the Lord to guide him wherever, to provide for him wherever. He's going to go wherever, and he's going to be fine. And at that point, when Abram's willing to give up that land, and he's willing, okay, have the best, have the fertile valley. You know, Abram gets to this moment where he's like, I'm going to give up the best to Lot. It's fine. I'm not worried about it. And in giving up and being willing to let go of something, he's given all of it. Right. So in the next little section, we have the promise. And Jehovah said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, eastward and westward. Remember that Lot went to the east. So he went towards, you see the Dead Sea there. So Abram stayed where Hebron is, right near Jerusalem and where the Gaza Strip is now. Abram stayed there, and then Lot went east towards the Dead Sea where Sodom and Gomorrah are. Okay. And so Jehovah tells Abram, look with your eyes, look all directions, even to the east where Lot just went. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth. So if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring can also be counted. Arise and walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron. And there he built an altar to Jehovah. So that's it's a picture. It's just a picture of the promises starting to be set up. Now let's move on to we're in Genesis 14. Genesis 14.
Genesis chapter number 14. And it came to be in the days of Amraphel, sovereign of Shinar, Arioch, sovereign of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, sovereign of Elam, and Tidal, sovereign of Goyim, that they fought against Berah, sovereign of Sodom, Bersha, sovereign of Amorah, Shenab, sovereign of Admah, Shemeber, sovereign of Seboyim, and the sovereign of Bela, that is Soar. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the sovereigns that were with him came and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Garnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emites in Shaweh Geriathaim, and the Horites in their mountains of Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hatzetzon Tamar, and the sovereign of Sodom, and the sovereign of Amorah, and the sovereign of Admah, and the sovereign of Seboyim, and the sovereign of Bela, that is Soar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Kedorlaomer, sovereign of Elam, and Tidal, sovereign of Goyim, and Amraphel, sovereign of Shinar, and Arioch, sovereign of Elasar, 4 sovereigns against 5. And the valley of Siddim had many tar pits, and the sovereigns of Sodom and Amorah fled and fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Amorah, and all their food, and went away. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sidon, and his goods, and left. And one who had escaped came and informed Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth tree of Mamre, the Amorite brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and they had a covenant with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, He armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he and his servants divided against them by night and smote them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is on the left of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as women and the people. And after his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer and the sovereigns who were with him, the sovereign of Sodom came out to meet him at the valley of Shaweh, that is, the sovereign's valley. And Melchizedek, sovereign of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was the priest of the Most High El. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High El, possessor of the heavens and earth. And blessed be the Most High El, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tenth of all. And the sovereign of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the sovereign of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to Yahweh, the Most High El, the possessor of the heavens and earth, not to take a thread or a sandal strap or whatever is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich, except only what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their portion.
Okay, so this is the battle of the kings. So you've got four kings against five kings, and they're battling it out. And Lot gets taken captive because he was hanging out in Sodom. And so it's good to notice that Lot does go back to Sodom as well, right? Because he's found in Sodom later. Um, and so Abram is refusing to take anything from the king of Sodom. So Sodom, as we've already established earlier in this portion, that Sodom, there's a lot of wickedness going on in Sodom, but they still helped. They still went out and retrieved Lot and helped Sodom retrieve all their goods. And then Abraham has this meeting with Melchizedek. Okay, so Melchizedek means it is Melchizedek is Prince of Peace. Yeah, Prince of Peace is Melchizedek. Now, he has this bread and wine. So notice the bread and wine. So what do we have in the future with Yeshua? Bread and wine. So bread and wine served together, eating the bread and wine is a picture of a covenant meal. So Abram is making a covenant and a relationship, an agreement with the Melchizedek king of Salem. Salem means city of peace, I believe, and it is believed that that was around Jerusalem, but there's some debate about that. So he's a priest of the Most High God, Melchizedek is, and he blesses Abraham and says, Blessed be Abraham by the Most High God, by Jehovah, the Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. So this Melchizedek had the authority to bless Abraham by the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. So you can see the authority to which Melchizedek is speaking. And blessed be Jehovah Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Now, here is something interesting. Because of Hebrews 7, most people read, and Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. But if you look at the text, and I haven't checked the Septuagint, but if you look at the Masoretic text, it doesn't say Abraham. It says he, and he gave him a tenth of everything. So it could very well be, Melchizedek giving Abraham a tenth of everything. Abram a tenth of everything. We don't know that. I can show you in the text. Let me just find it here. Oh, I deleted it. let's just look it up really quick so you don't call me a liar. Genesis 14. Here, let me show you. Okay, so if you look here, here's that section, okay? Blessed be Abraham by Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be El. So it's El Elyon. So in this Torah portion, there's several examples. There's 3 examples of Jehovah's name, and so here it's El Elyon, um, uh, the creator, possessor of heaven and earth. And these are important to notice because this differentiates the God that they are speaking about. Okay. So if they would just, because all of the people at that time were worshiping all the pagan gods, right? So all of the angels and spiritual authorities that were not the creator of heaven and earth. But you see here, we have El Elyon, who's the possessor of heaven and earth. Okay. So this El Elyon is the one that possesses the heaven and earth. Okay. And that's like that defining differentiation between who he is versus who the pagans are worshiping. Okay. So you see here, okay, we're talking about Melchizedek. Okay. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought bread and wine. He is the priest of El Elyon, and he blessed him. So he's blessing Abraham. Okay. Melchizedek is saying this, and then it's translated here, and Abram. But Abram isn't in there. It's he. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, the word Abram isn't in there. So it's just, he gave him a tenth of everything. So it could be Abram giving him a tenth of everything, or it could be Melchizedek giving Abram, because the context of this is all of this is Melchizedek doing things. So why did it change here all of a sudden to Abram when Abram's not in there in the text? That would be something somebody could look up in the Septuagint, because I would be super interested to see how that looks in the Septuagint. Regardless, the reason that it's translated this way, I believe for the most part, is due to Hebrews 7. So let's go and take a look at Hebrews 7 now so that you can understand where this kind of theology all comes from. Hebrews 7. Okay, so I think, yeah, well, let's just read all of Hebrews 7. I'm going to flip the camera again so I can read. I'm just pointing it out because it's interesting. I don't have a theology either way on it. I just think it's something that you should be aware of. And if Melchizedek indeed blessed Abram with a tenth, that doesn't change that Melchizedek is the high priest. That's actually Melchizedek blessing Abraham as a priest as well. So it's not a problem. It's not a problem to read it the other way. I just find it interesting because if you read the context of the section, it doesn't make sense, especially because Abram isn't a word that's there. Okay, so let's go to Hebrews 7. This Melchizedek was the king of Salem and the priest of the El Elyon, God Most High. He met Abram, returning from the defeat of the kings, and blessed him. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. So this is Hebrews saying it, but Hebrews saying it doesn't necessarily change the text that's in Genesis, okay? So we have to kind of determine. This is an important thing to understand about the New Testament. A lot of the writings of the New Testament is, some of them are interpretations, right? They're that person's perspective. So if Paul wrote Hebrews, this is Paul's theology, right? And we all have different theology. Whereas Genesis to Numbers, I think is the last one, or Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Torah, that's the root that we all have to base on and understand. It's okay for you to disagree with Paul. It's okay for you to disagree with Paul sometimes. Absolutely okay, because Paul is speaking from interpreting the text to his theology. Paul went under Gamaliel. So Gamaliel had a theology. The Sadducees had a theology. The Pharisees had a theology. And a theology is just a way of looking at things. So just because Paul looked at something in a certain particular way doesn't mean that we all have to look at it the same way that Paul did. Was he anointed? Yes. Was he blessed? Yes. That doesn't mean that he wasn't human. There's very good examples of Paul being human, just like there's very good examples of Abraham being human. We have to not elevate these people that are writing above Jehovah, right? So just be aware of that, right? That's just my point of view on it. When Paul says things that some of them are cultural too, right? Some of them are cultural, and some of the letters and stuff that Paul are writing are for the particular situation, especially when you're looking at Galatians or Corinthians. He's addressing a particular situation. It's kind of like if you were to read a pastor's emails to his congregation and he's talking to the elders of his congregation. If you were to go in and read one side of the emails of your pastor talking to his congregation, and you didn't know the other side of the emails, you're missing half the story. So you got to add in what the rest of the story is, right? And this is extremely important with Paul's letters because you only have the one side. The letters that were saved were the ones that were within the congregation that the congregation received from Paul. The letters that went out with the issue that the congregation was dealing with, those weren't saved, right? And so just another way of looking at things. A lot of people put Paul as scripture. I don't personally. I put Paul as letters, just like it says Paul is letters, right? They're the letters from Paul. Yeah, that's just my take on it. I don't put Paul above the Torah ever. So this is Paul's take. It was Hebrews. Hebrews is said to be written by Paul. Not everybody agrees on that. So, like you could see, the more you study this stuff, the more you'll start to understand that there's layers and layers and layers and layers. And so find a balance, because if you're going into things with so many extremes, and never finding the balance, it'll cause your faith to waver, because you have to understand that these are humans, humans interacting as well, right? Okay, so back to Hebrews 7. First, the name of Melchizedek means king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem, which means king of peace. So Melchizedek means king of righteousness and king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the plunder. Now, the law requires the descendants of Levi who become priests to collect a tenth from the people, that is, from their fellow Israelites. Then, though, they are also descended from Abraham. This man, however, did not trace his descent from Levi, yet he collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. And without doubt, the lesser is blessed by the greater. This is another reason why I kind of question that thing, because if the lesser is blessed by the greater, then Melchizedek giving Abraham a blessing of tenth would be him blessing, like the lesser blessing the greater, the lesser being blessed by the greater. So it does make sense to do it the other way. And in this one case, the tenth is collected by people who die, and in this other case, by him who is declared to be living. One might even say that Levi, who collects the tenth, paid the tenth through Abraham, because when Melchizedek met Abraham, Levi was still in the body of an ancestor. So the seed of Levi was still in the body of Abraham. Okay, so what Paul or whoever wrote this is trying to say is that Melchizedek is eternal and he is above all. He's above all the Levite priesthood. He's above the Aaronic priesthood. He's above all of that, right? What's really interesting is that you can trace Yeshua. So Yeshua would have had the lineage of all the priesthoods. He would have had the lineage for every group. because he came from Judah, right? And he came from Abraham, right? So if perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, and indeed the law was given to the people established in that priesthood, why is there still need for another priest to come in the order of Melchizedek and not in the order of Aaron? For when the priesthood is changed, the law must be changed also. For whom these things, for of whom these things have said belong to a different tribe, and for the tribe, and no one from that tribe has served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah in regard to that tribe of Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become priest not on the basis of regulation as to his ancestry, but to the basis of the power of an indestructible life. For it is declared, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. That is from Psalm 110:4. Psalm 110:4. So that is talking about Yeshua as a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to Yahuwah. And it was not without oath. Others became priests without any oath, but he became a priest with an oath that Yahuwah said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. And that's Psalm 110 again. Because of this oath, Yeshua has become the guarantor of a better covenant. And now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. But because Yeshua lives forever, he is a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he shall save completely all those who come to Yehovah through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest truly meets our needs, the one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike any other high priest, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once and for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weakness, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son, who has been made perfect forever. So this discussion that Paul is having is in regards to, can Yeshua be a high priest, right? Because they were debating whether Yeshua could be a high priest because of the lineage thing and because he wasn't the son of Levi, he wasn't a Levite, etc., etc. He wasn't in the line of Aaron. Regardless, what Paul is trying to establish is that he's a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, which is a different priesthood. So let's go to Psalm 110. So the change in the law is the change in the way that the law is lived out. So it's lived out through the sacrifice of Yeshua rather than lived out through going to the temple, doing sacrifices on the altar, all of that, sacrificing animals continually. So for once he covers our sin, and that doesn't mean that we're free to go sinning and we're free to go do whatever we want. It means that because he's covered that sin, we now have access to Yehovah. That's why the curtain was torn, right? So let's go to Psalm 110. This is a psalm that David wrote. I'm going to read it in my version because I don't like this version. A psalm of David. Yehovah says to my Adon, sit at my right hand. Adon means Lord, until I make your enemies your footstool. Yehovah sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in your holy garments. From the womb of the morning and the dew of your youth will be yours. Jehovah has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Jehovah is at your right hand. Adonai is at your right hand, and he will shatter the kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, for filling them with corpses. He will shatter chiefs and he over the wide earth. He will drink from the brook by the way, and therefore he will lift up his head. So interesting to notice the kings. Adonai is at your right hand, and he will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. So just take a mental note of the kings and the corpses, because we have kings and corpses also in the Torah portion that we've been discussing. Right now we just went through the different kings and how the kings are having this battle, and then you have Melchizedek. So it's really interesting to see how these things all line up. Okay, so let's just move on to 15, and we're going to go into God's covenant with Abram. So we're at Genesis 15.
Genesis chapter number 15. After these events, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great. And Abram said, Master Yahweh, what would you give me, seeing I go childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, See, you have given me no seed, and see, one born in my house is my heir. And see, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, This one is not your heir, but he who comes from your own body is your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look now toward the heavens, and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And he said to him, So are your seed. And he believed in Yahweh, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. And he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans, to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Master Yahweh, whereby do I know that I possess it? And he said to him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, and a 3-year-old female goat, and a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took all these to him, and cut them in the middle, and placed each half opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds. And the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. And it came to be, when the sun was going down, and a deep sleep fell upon Abram, that see, a frightening great darkness fell upon him. And he said to Abram, Know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possessions. Now, as for you, you are to go to your fathers in peace. You are to be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the crookedness of the Amorite is not yet complete. And it came to be, when the sun went down and it was dark, that see, a smoking oven and a burning torch passing between those pieces. On the same day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your seed, from the river of Mitzrayim to the great river, the river Euphrates, with the Gainite and the Genezite and the Gadomite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Raphaim and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girgashite and the Jebusite.
Okay, so that is the moment of the covenant. I just want to point out when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. So that's Genesis 15:11. Now that reminded me of when Yeshua says, "Wherever the corpses are, the vultures will be." Let's look at that really quick here, because I think that perhaps Yeshua is in that moment pointing back to this moment of Abram. So in that section where Yeshua is talking about the corpses and the vultures, which is Matthew 24. I had thought I'd saved it, but I don't see it now. Matthew 24, let's just read that section. I'm going to go ahead we're at 24:15. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, and let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down and take what is in his house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back and take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation that has not been since the beginning of the world until now, and no, will never be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. For the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, even if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand, so that if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. And if they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and shines from the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. So I found that incredibly interesting, because I think that's a point back to this covenant with Abraham. I think he's directing people to remember that covenant. And so he's saying, look, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. Look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe. For as lightning comes from the east and the west, as far as the west, so will be the coming of Son of Man. So I think he's also saying that it's going to occur on that place where Abram made that covenant as well. In Jerusalem. I think that was Jerusalem, wasn't it? I'll have to look that up. So going back to that Torah portion. So he cuts the two pieces and separates them. And that's a picture of dividing the two pieces. And what's really interesting is eventually the two houses are divided, right? So in the covenant, the house of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel and Judah, and they're going to be divided eventually. And so this is a picture of they're going to be divided, but there's only one that can put them back together, and that is Yehovah, right? So he's going to rejoin the halves, the two halves, and how they've been split. He's going to rejoin them, and that's what he talks about in Ezekiel 37. So in Ezekiel 37, it talks about the two sticks being joined as one in his hand, Judah, and then Ephraim and Joseph, right? Because they were split. Right now, they're split. Right now, we have all the northern kingdom all throughout the nations, which was prophesied. And then eventually, they're going to be joined back together. And then they're going to possess the land. What else is really interesting to point out here is that know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not yours and will be servants there, so that his offspring eventually go to Egypt. But I think there's also a greater telling of this, where all the offspring of Abram have been scattered throughout the nations, right? And they will be afflicted for 400 years. So the people were made slaves in Egypt for 400 years. And then eventually judgment comes upon that nation that they serve. So all of those who have been in as a servant to Egypt, to evil, to that system, a judgment will eventually come upon that system. And then those people who are in covenant with Jehovah, those children of Abraham, are going to come out with great possessions. So a verse that is also good to remember is, and they shall come back here in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So iniquity is all about doing things the opposite of God's ways, doing things in just like the most filthy, vile way. And we're seeing some of that in this war, right? Like we saw just the horrible things that were happening to people that have been kidnapped, to the children and all of that stuff. I'm not going to get into details because I don't want to get banned on TikTok. But as you all have probably heard the stories about the iniquity that was being done to the people in this act of warfare, which I don't think is really warfare. I think it's just terrorism. And so this iniquity is growing and growing and growing. And the filthiness of this war is growing and growing and growing. And that's that iniquity becoming complete. And it's got to be completely filthy and vile, as in the days of Noah. Everything was just filthy and disgusting and vile. And that's the iniquity of the Amorites becoming complete. Once that is complete, that's when the Exodus again will happen. There'll be a second Exodus and the two sticks will join together, right? The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And so as much as we are sad and horrified by the things that are going on in the world, we see so much darkness and just horrible things going on in the world. We have to understand that iniquity has to be complete for Jehovah for his judgment to pour out upon that system. And then those who are in covenant and those who are the children of Abraham will be drawn out of the nations, right? And back into the land. Okay, so we're on Sarai and Hagar, chapter 16. Genesis 16 is what we are at.
Genesis chapter number 16. And Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no child, and she had a Mitzrite female servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, See, Yahweh has kept me from bearing children. Please go into my female servant. It might be that I am built up by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her female servant, the Mitzrite, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said to Abram, My wrong be upon you. I gave my female servant into your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Let Yahweh judge between you and me. And Abram said to Sarai, See, your female servant is in your hand. Do to her what is good in your eyes. And Sarai treated her harshly, and she fled from her presence. And the messenger of Yahweh found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's female servant, where have you come from, and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of Sarai, my mistress. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, Return to your mistress and humble yourself under her hand. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, I am going to increase your seed greatly, too numerous to be counted. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, See, you are conceiving and bearing a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. And he is to be a wild man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and dwell over against all his brothers. And she called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her. You are the El who sees. For she said, even here have I seen after him who sees me. That is why the well was called Be'er Lahai Roi. See, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son whom Hagar bore Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram.
Right, just something quick to point out. Abram is not circumcised at this point. So he bears a son to he bears a son from Hagar. Hagar means the foreigner, the foreigner. So she came into their community from, was likely a gift from Pharaoh. And so when Sarai left Pharaoh's presence after Pharaoh realized she was married, he sent Abram out with servants and gifts and all of that. And so Hagar was likely a servant that was sent out with her. And that's why Hagar's name means the foreigner. So was that her given birth name? I don't know, but that's what they called her, the foreigner. Um, so this is the only example of Sarah going against, kind of going against and speaking up to her husband. Sarah treated Abram like a king, and she was a like very submitted to him, very humbled towards him. And that was a beautiful thing. And in this, because Hagar had come between their relationship, so what had happened is when she conceived, she started to look upon Sarah with contempt and come against her and not be humble. Kind of like she felt really proud that she got knocked up, and Sarah wasn't blessed with having a pregnancy yet. And so she looked on her with contempt, and that's when the issues started to happen. And so Sarah speaks up to Abraham and said, may the wrong be done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace. When she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May Jehovah judge between you and me. So she's saying, don't let the servant girl get in between our relationship. May only Jehovah be the judge between you and I. And so this is when Sarah started to deal more harshly with Hagar, and Hagar runs away. But Hagar does go back. So she comes back, and then she'll leave again. So what's also interesting to notice here is that the angel of Jehovah speaking to her is telling her, he's prophesying to her that she's going to have the multiply your offspring, and they're going to be, they can't even be numbered, just like Abram's offspring will not be able be numbered. So Abram's offspring through Sarai will not be able to be numbered. And she's prophesying over the type of man that Ishmael will be. He's going to be a wild donkey of a man. So a wild donkeys represent kind of the burdens that you bear in this life, or the walk that you bear in this life. That's why Yeshua rode in on a donkey to Jerusalem when he was going to die. A donkey is a beast of burden. And so the burden that Ishmael is going to present in this life, the way that he's going to show himself in this life, is he's going to be a wild donkey. He's going to just kind of be all over the place, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him. And you can see that in Ishmael's lineage, and the way that it's all worked out. So Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram, which is quite old. So now, he's Ishmael's been born, and so you got to notice that Abram wasn't circumcised before Ishmael was born. Him and Sarah are still operating in a bit of lack of faith, right? Sarah was given the promise that she's going to have a son. I don't think we've gone to that part yet, though, actually. Or maybe we did it last week. But then she laughs and says, how am I going to have a son when I'm this old, right? So now we're going to go on to chapter 17, Genesis 17.
Genesis chapter number 17. And it came to be when Abram was 99 years old that Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect. And I give my covenant between me and you, and shall greatly increase you. And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim spoke with him, saying, As for me, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations. And no longer is your name called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, because I shall make you a father of many nations. And I shall make you bear fruit exceedingly, and make nations of you, and sovereigns shall come from you. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and your seed after you. And I shall give to you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I shall be their Elohim. And Elohim said to Abraham, As for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you guard between me and you, and your seed after you. Every male child among you is to be circumcised, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you. It is circumcised by you. Every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house, or bought with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed, he who is born in your house, and he who is bought with your silver, has to be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, for an everlasting covenant. And an uncircumcised male child, who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And Elohim said to Abraham, As for Sarai, your wife, do not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I shall bless her, and also give you a son by her. And I shall bless her, and she shall become nations. Sovereigns of peoples are to be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Is a child born to a man who is 100 years old, or to Sarah, who is 90 years old, to bear a child? And Abraham said to Elohim, Oh, let Ishmael live before you. And Elohim said, No, Sarah your wife is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Yitzhak. And I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, I shall bless him, and shall make him bear fruit, and greatly increase him. He is to bring forth 12 princes, and I shall make him a great nation. But my covenant I establish with Yitzhak, whom Sarah is to bear to you at this set time next year. When he had ended speaking with him, Elohim went up from Abraham, and Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house, and all those bought with his silver, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that same day, as Elohim told him. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised that same day. And all the men of his house, born in the house or bought with silver from a foreigner, were circumcised with him.
Okay. So interesting. So this is the point where Abraham's given the promise for Isaac again, and that, even Sarah, who's 90, shall bear a child. And walking in faith. Okay, I need you guys to picture this for a second, because I don't think we picture this, what Yah is asking Abraham to do. Okay, so just think about what Yah is asking Abraham to do. Not only do it to yourself, but go and do it to all the people that are with you. By then, Abram had a great amount of people, a great amount of men, grown men that were with him. And he's going to go to them and say, okay, Yah told me I need you guys to do this. And he's going to instruct them to all do what Yah asks. Just like think about how that actually, would have played out. Going to grown men and asking them to do this, right? Very, very interesting. You know that the spirit of Yah had to be moving in order to make this happen. And so Ishmael was circumcised at 13. What's interesting about circumcision is on the 8th day, the baby is the day that the baby has the most vitamin K in their system ever in life. So circumcising on the 8th day is like the precise time that it is correct to do that. That was when the most healing will happen really quickly, so that it's not painful. And when you do it as an adult, it's very apparently, I wouldn't know, obviously, it's very painful, and people are unable to do much for at least 3 days. And so you'll see here in the coming Torah portion that after Abraham's circumcised, he gets up right away, even though he's probably in pain, and he becomes a servant to the messengers that come. We'll get into that next week, I think, will be in the Torah portion. So Abraham's being given the promise, and then he's being asked to walk in faith. So first he was given the promise, and then he had to cut the animals and show that. He's like, okay, you're giving me the promise. You're saying go cut the animals. I'm cutting the animals and I'm going to do it. And so every time he's given a promise, he then walks forward in faith to be a part of that promise. So we walk with Yehovah. We halakha with Yehovah. It's not just about that mental, okay, I have a promise from Yehovah, but it's also walking in faith towards that promise. And that's what emunah means. Enuma. I'll show you this, which means amen. So when we look at enuma, when you look at faith, okay, so faith is that Hebrew word enuma, and it also is related to saying amen, right? And faith is walking towards the thing you're having faith in. So if you were, okay, so Yehovah gave you a promise and he said, I'm going to increase your family and you're going to have a baby. And then all of a sudden you decide to not walk in the faith of that promise. You start using contraception or something like that. And then you don't have that. So you're not walking in faith towards what Yehovah has said to you. So if you're not walking in faith towards what he has said is for you, then you're walking backwards away from his promise, right? So if Yehovah gives you a promise, part of the test is that you believe in the promise and walk towards the promise, depending on what the promises he's given to you. And he's given us all multiple promises in scripture. And so we're either walking in the opposite direction of his promises or we're walking in the direction towards his promises that he has given us in scripture, right? Let's go to James 2:18. James 2:18. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that Yehovah is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. So even the demons believe in Yehovah and they shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that the faith was active among his works, and the faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, for he was called a friend of Yehovah. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And you see the same way, and in the same way was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by the other way. As for the body apart from the spirit is dead, and so faith apart from works is dead. So this is James, the brother of Yeshua, writing this, right? And he's saying that your body and your spirit are connected. So if you believe something, you truly believe something, you're going to go and do it, right? Um, let's go on to the half Torah portion, which is Isaiah 40. I'm just going to listen to it from this one just because it'll be easier. So Isaiah 40:27.
Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Listen to me in silence, O coastlands. Let the peoples renew their strength. Let them approach, then let them speak. Let us together draw near for judgment. Who stirred up one from the east, whom victory meets at every step? He gives up nations before him, so that he tramples kings underfoot. He makes them like dust with his sword, like driven stubble with his bow. He pursues them and passes on safely, by paths his feet have not trod. Who has performed and done this, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. The coastlands have seen and are afraid. The ends of the earth tremble. They have drawn near and come. Everyone helps his neighbor and says to his brother, be strong. The craftsman strengthens the goldsmith, and he who smooths with the hammer, him who strikes the anvil, saying of the soldering, it is good. And they strengthen it with nails, so that it cannot be moved. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Behold, all who are incensed against you shall be put to shame and confounded. Those who strive against you shall be as nothing and shall perish. You shall seek those who contend with you, but you shall not find them. Those who war against you shall be as nothing at all. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not, I am the one who helps you. Fear not, you worm, Jacob, you man of Israel. I am the one who helps you, declares the Lord. Your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I make of you a threshing sledge, new, sharp, and having teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and crush them, and you shall make the hills like chaff. You shall winnow them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the tempest shall scatter them. And you shall rejoice in the Lord, in the Holy One of Israel you shall glory.
Okay, now this is super interesting because in this section of Isaiah, he's talking about Jacob being made like a threshing sledge. We've talked about these threshing sledges before. They're a board and they have all the sharp rocks in them, and they run them over the harvest, and that's how the harvest is processed. So now here, Israel is going to be made into the threshing sledge. So they're going to crush and make the hills like chaff and winnow them, and the wind shall carry them away. So the whatever they're winnowing, the wind is going to carry them away. Um, wanted to look at a couple things that are very, very interesting, but I think we'll do the rest of John first before I go to, it's just some stuff about the circumcision that we need to look at. We're not going to get too much to Galatians today. We'll get into that later. But I want to show you a couple of things in Ezekiel and Jeremiah. So let's do the gospel portion. We're going to go to John 8:51 to 58.
Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. The Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets died. Who do you make yourself out to be? Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am.
Okay, so I want to take you back to, I want to just point something out to you about the circumcision, because there's a very, very poorly translated verse in Jeremiah 9 that is so interesting. Let me find it for you. Jeremiah 9:25 and 26. Okay. This is gonna be interesting. Trust me on it. All right. So here is the verse this is ESV. Okay. Behold, the days are coming, declares Jehovah, that I will punish those who are circumcised merely in the flesh. Egypt, Judah, Edom, and the sons of Ammon, Moab, and all who dwell in the desert, who cut the corners of their hair. For all of these nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel is uncircumcised in heart. That's what the ESV says, okay? I want you to look at what the KJV did with this. Behold, the days come, says Jehovah, that I will punish all them which are circumcised with the uncircumcised. Egypt and Judah, Edom and the children of Ammon and Moab, and all that are in the utmost corners that dwell in the wilderness, all of those nations are uncircumcised, for the house of Israel are uncircumcised in the heart. So in this, which I've, if you look at the Hebrew, this is closer. So he's going to punish the circumcised with the uncircumcised, okay? It's not just those who are uncircumcised, who are circumcised in only the flesh, the circumcised with the uncircumcised. And that are on the utmost corners that dwell in the wilderness, and all these nations are uncircumcised, for the house of Israel are uncircumcised in the heart. So throughout the text, there's a lot of talk about circumcision in the heart and in the flesh. I wanted you to look at Ezekiel 44:7. And I just want to point out that there's several examples where we eventually need to have both, okay? In admitting foreigners uncircumcised in the heart and flesh to be in my sanctuary, profaning my temple, where you offer me food and fat and the blood, and you have broken my covenant in addition to your abominations. You have not kept charge of my holy things. You have set others to keep charge for you in my sanctuary, okay? Let's just go back. 6. And say to the rebellious house, to the house of Israel, thus says Jehovah Adonai, O house of Israel, enough of your abominations in admitting foreigners uncircumcised in the heart and flesh to be in my sanctuary, profaning my temple when you offer me food and the fat of the blood. You have broken my covenant in addition to all your abominations. You have not kept charge of my holy things. You have set others to keep my charge for you in my sanctuary. Thus says Jehovah Adonai, no foreigner uncircumcised in the heart of flesh, and all the foreigners among the people of Israel shall enter my sanctuary. Okay? So you have to be circumcised of the heart and the flesh. But remember, before you go off in the comments, remember that Abraham was called out of Ur, and he walked with Jehovah for a considerable amount of years and even birthed Ishmael before he got circumcised. So the process isn't get circumcised right away. The process is leave Egypt, leave Babylon, leave the evil places, leave the land of idols, right? That is a trajectory. You leave the land of idols first, and then you walk with Jehovah in the wilderness, and then eventually you come into that fullness of the covenant, okay? The other thing we could look at, and so that's what Galatians is talking about, just to get into a bit of Galatians. That's what Galatians is talking about. So the circumcision party, what is the context of of Galatians? The circumcision party was saying you have to be fully circumcised and fully in covenant and understand the whole Torah before you can be saved, okay? Before you can enter your walk with Jehovah. What Paul was saying is, no, like the example of Abraham, the same example. That's why they repeat Abraham's story over and over and over again in the New Testament. They're trying to get people to understand that you leave Babylon, you leave Egypt first, you leave the country of idols first, and then you walk with Jehovah. And as you walk, your faith grows, your faith grows, your faith grows. And then eventually you're supposed to end up in this place where your flesh and your heart are both circumcised. And let's not think of it as like such a literal, like, how is a woman circumcised, right? Circumcised in the heart. Our flesh is cut. We cut our heart so that we're submissive to the men in our life, so that we are obedient to Jehovah, so that we are under his covering. So that's how a woman would be circumcised of the heart, right? And circumcised of the flesh, that you're not lusting, that you're not greedy, that you're all of those pieces of fleshly life you are cutting off, right? Whereas for men, it's more literal, okay? And it's more literal, and it's also figurative. So you're not supposed to be lusting, and you're not supposed to be doing the things of your flesh, but you're also supposed to be subjecting your flesh to understanding the covenant, okay? So what the circumcision party was doing, and what the debate was in Galatians, wasn't that, you should never get circumcised, or no, it's this understanding of you need to walk out the commandments, you need to live by faith, right? Just like James said, right? Faith without works is dead. You got to walk in faith into the covenant. You got to walk through the covenant in faith, and you have to let Jehovah lead you and be obedient to whatever he's showing you to do. Be obedient, right? And sometimes that means giving up your bacon. Sometimes that means, keeping the Sabbath. You have to read the scriptures and figure out what Jehovah wants through the scriptures, right? Not in your own heart, though. So what the circumcision party was saying is you have to know all of this from the beginning. You have to get it all in the beginning. And what really happens is we come and we walk through the wilderness and we learn and we grow. And then eventually we come into a deeper covenant. Just like Abraham, when Abraham was in the wilderness of Haran, what did he do? He was lying to Pharaoh. When he went into Egypt, he was lying to Pharaoh and saying that Sarah was his sister, and not telling them that he was his wife. So all of this stuff was happening, and Ishmael was born because Abram and Sarah were not being faithful to the promise that Jehovah gave them. So if Abram and Sarah were faithful 100% to the promise that Jehovah had given them, they wouldn't have had the Hagar Ishmael dilemma, right? Because they would have believed Jehovah 100%. Abraham wasn't circumcised fully at that point. He was still walking in the wilderness and learning and growing and learning how to walk with Jehovah. And so that's what is the picture is being presented in Galatians. Is it's okay to learn and come into understanding and learn and walk with Jehovah. You learn by being under grace and learning as you go. You're not going to learn all of the scriptures in 1 week. You're not going to get saved and know all of the scriptures in 1 week. It's a lifetime process, right? But your goal is to be circumcised of the heart and the flesh so that you are being obedient to Jehovah to max extent, right? And that's why Abraham, as he gets closer and closer and closer in his walk with Jehovah, he's asked to give up more, right? So first he's asked to cut the animals in half. He's asked to sacrifice that, right? Then he's asked to sacrifice his foreskin. So he's asked to sacrifice that. And then he's asked to what? Offer up Ishmael, which was his promise. And so he's asked to offer up his son. And what it's a picture of is being willing to walk with Jehovah and trust him fully with whatever he's going to ask you to do, trusting him 100%. And that is the picture being presented, right? So when we look at Acts 15, let's go into Acts 15 because this is usually a stumbling block for people. Acts 15. This is where they have talked about, and this is how they settled the issue, right? And they're saying the exact same things I'm saying. The presence of Jehovah was with these people, just like the presence of Jehovah was with Abraham before he was circumcised, before he was walking out the covenant in that way. The presence of Jehovah was with the people in the wilderness before they were circumcised, okay? The presence of Jehovah is with us in the wilderness as we walk through, right? And so Acts 15, some of the men came down from Judea and they were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. So is that true? No, that's not true, because Abraham was saved from Ur. The Israelites were saved from Egypt. None of them, they marked the door with the blood. That's all they did. They did not do anything. It was by grace and faith that they were saved and drawn out of those places, just like Abraham was saved and drawn out of those places. After Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas said, some of the others were appointed to go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the church, they passed through both Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail the conversion of the Gentiles, and brought great joy to all the brothers. And when they came to Jerusalem and they were welcomed by the church and the apostles and the elders, and they declared all that Jehovah had done with them. But some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees rose up and said, it is necessary to circumcise them in order them to keep the law of Moses. Okay. So they're saying that in order for them to be saved and be a part of the community, they have to circumcise them and they have to keep the law of Moses. They have to basically come under the authority of the Pharisees. And the apostles and the elders were gathered together and to consider this matter. And after there had been much debate, Peter stood up and said to them, brothers, you know that in the early days, Jehovah made a choice among you, that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And Jehovah, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the Holy Spirit, just as he did to us, and made no distinction between us and them, having cleansed our hearts by faith. Therefore, why are you putting Jehovah to the test by placing a yoke of the disciples, which is neither our the yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither our fathers nor us have been able to bear? But we believe that we are saved through the grace of the Lord Yeshua, and that just as they will. And the assembly fell silent, and they listened to Barnabas and Paul as they related the signs and wonders that Jehovah had done through them among the Gentiles. And after they finished speaking, James replied, brothers, listen to me. Simon has related how God first visited the Gentiles to take from them a people for his name. And with this, the words of the prophets agree, just as it is written. After this, I will return and I will rebuild the tent of David that has fallen. I will rebuild its ruins and I will restore it. And the remnant of mankind may seek Jehovah. So all the Gentiles who are called by my name say to Jehovah, who makes these things known from old. Therefore, my judgment is we should not trouble trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to Jehovah, but should write to them to abstain from things polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, and from what has been strangled, and from the blood, and from blood. For from ancient generations, Moses has in every city those who proclaim him, and for he is read every Sabbath in the synagogues. Okay, so they're having this debate, and it's the same debate that goes on today. Do you have to do all of this first to be saved, all this stuff? Whenever I talk about this, on TikTok or anywhere, people say, this is not for salvation. No, it's not for salvation. You walk with Jehovah, you learn his rules and statutes, because that's how you learn how he sees the world and how he created the world, right? But if you're brand new coming in, so say you got a brand new believer, they were a drug addict, they were in fornication, they're not going to learn the entire Torah and all the different things and all the different nuances of the way Jehovah sees things in 1 week. They have to just get clean enough and get enough of the sin out of their life so that they can start learning. Usually they need some deliverance. Usually it needs a lot of prayer. Usually they need support. If they're still fornicating and doing new age practices, they got to deal with those things first. So this is what the gentleman at this time had decided, okay? We should write to them to abstain from things polluted by idols. So things polluted by idols would include Halloween. That would include Xmas. That would include Easter. Those things are polluted by idols, right? So are we teaching the Gentiles to abstain from the things polluted by idols? Halloween, polluted by idols. Xmas, polluted by idols. Easter, polluted by idols, right? Those things are polluted by idols. So we're supposed to teach the Gentiles to abstain from those things, okay? Sexual immorality. Sexual immorality and things polluted by idols usually go hand in hand. And that is why we see so much sexual immorality in the church now. You see sexual immorality throughout the scriptures go hand in hand with being polluted by idols. When Bilam and Balak enticed the people to fornicate with the Moabites, that they ended up in idol worship. When they were worshiping the golden calf, they ended up in fornication. Fornication and idolatry always come together. They are in part just connected. They always end up together. Because why? Because if you are willing to be weak in the small things, if you're willing to be weak in any area and just be and not follow Jehovah in any single area, then there's no line for you anymore. You can cross whatever line you want. If you are fully saved by grace and none of the commandments matter, eventually none of the commandments will matter to you, and you will just keep going down this tumbling place. And that's why we have the church that we have today out there, where anything goes, right? Because if you throw away all the commands, then eventually anything goes, right? I saw this video from this girl, and she's a mainstream Christian, and she was saying that she was courting in mainstream Christianity, and every situation that she got herself in when she was courting and going out on dates with these gentlemen in mainstream Christianity, none of them wanted to wait for marriage. All of them wanted to fornicate. And she was so confused by this. And I'm like, well, it makes perfect sense to me, because if you have a Jesus that you have designed in your own mind that does away with the commandments, that is, everything is based on grace, and you don't have to walk in righteousness at all or try to walk in righteousness at all, eventually you're going to get to this place where fornication is fine. And we are warned about this in the book of Revelation several times. So in Acts 15, he's telling the people to abstain from these things. And abstain from what has been strangled and from the blood. So back in that day, they wouldn't have clean slaughtering. And so you'd have the blood still in the animal. And so basically you're trying to get people into a state where they could come into the synagogue and begin to learn. Okay. And that's why, so people read Acts 15 and they read those little things. Okay. So do not murder isn't in there. Do not lie isn't in there. So this was not supposed to be only these 4 commands you keep. it's telling you where you to begin to start to learn the Torah so that you can learn and progress and walk in the wilderness with Jehovah and learn the Torah and learn the different commandments. Okay. That's why you don't see do not murder in here. You do not see do not lie in here. There's some key commandments that are missing from this verse, right? So what what Paul and Barnabas were instructing was that as they come into synagogue on the Sabbath day, where Moses will be read. Okay, so Moses was supposed to be read in the synagogues on the Sabbath, and the Gentiles, it says this right here. Like it says it right here, clear as day. The Gentiles were supposed to be reading Moses every Sabbath in the synagogue. Now that's why I do this on here, so that the Moses can get out to the Gentiles, right? Because most people don't have synagogues and access to synagogues anymore to go hear Moses, right? So this seemed good to the apostles and elders with the whole church to choose men among them and send them to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. And they sent Judas to call Barnabas and Silas, leading the men among his brothers with the following letters. The brothers, both the apostles and the elders, to the brothers who are the Gentiles in Antioch and Syria and Cilicia, greetings. Since we have heard that some persons have gone out from us, troubled you with words, unsettling your minds, although we gave them no instructions, it seemed good to us, having to come to one accord, to choose men and send them to you on with our beloved Barnabas and Paul, men who have risked their lives for the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, and therefore sent Judas and Silas, who themselves will tell you the same things by the word of mouth. So it seemed good to the Holy Spirit. And let us lay on you no greater burden than these requirements, that you abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, from the blood, from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality, and keep yourself free from these, and you will do well. So they were to keep themselves free of those things, and then they were to go to the synagogue and start to learn, right? And you can debate this quite easily with the fact that there's so many commandments not in there that are obviously need to be kept, right? Unequal weights and measures, lying, cheating, all of that needs to be learned by the new Gentiles coming in, right? And so they didn't have the New Testament then. None of that was written. The only thing they had to study was the Tanakh. So they had to learn the Tanakh and to learn not to cheat, not to lie, not to steal through reading that. So I hope that clears that up for a lot of people, because it seems to be a lot of times I find what happens is people read half of it and they don't really think about all of the little details that are being actually said there. I'm going to stop this recording now for today. And then if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss, we can do that.